1 John chapter 2 and verse 4, starting verse 3. We know that we have come to know him if we obey his commands. The man, verse 4, the man who says, I know him, but does not do what he commands, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. Now, let me just pause here. If you go to the end of John, and don't do it later, and study in 1 John chapter 5, John has a peculiar, and unique, I should say, more than peculiar, characteristic. And that's that when he writes, he tells us why he writes. All right? So, in his gospel account, when we get to the end of the Gospel of John, he tells us that he's written these things so that you might believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and by believing you might have life. So he has an evangelistic intent and design and purpose in writing the gospel. It's so that you know that Jesus is the Son of God, the Messiah, and that by believing you may have life. When you get to 1 John, he tells us at the end, in chapter 5, why he's written this epistle. He says, I've written to you who believe, so that you may know that you believe and have eternal life. Right? So he writes to people to distinguish, if you will, whether they believe and they know they believe, they can have assurance or not. And he says, verse 3, again, we know that we have come to know him, right? Many people say, I know Jesus, right? My daughter was talking to somebody yesterday at this seminar she was at. Oh yeah, I believe in Jesus, I know Jesus. Of course, I'm not into it at the moment, which meant I want to live like I want to live, right? But John says, no, we know that we have come to know him if we obey his commands. Why? Because if you love me, you'll keep my commands, right? And I said there's a converse here, verse 4. The man who says, I know him, but does not do what he commands, is a liar, and the truth is not in him. Now at this point, the pastor, the preacher always has to back up and say, that's not Paul Murphy speaking. That's black and white, Holy Spirit inspired John speaking there. In other words, that's not my opinion. It's not a bunch of preachers' rhetoric. All right? It's not somebody engaging in excessive homiletical display. John's writing to let people know whether or not they can have assurance. And he says, if we obey his commands, we can know we've come to know him. But somebody says, I know him, and doesn't do what he commands, so that's a troubling situation. You see. So the way of holiness is the way of obedience to Jesus Christ. Grateful, loving, Holy Spirit moving obedience. We must, as the author of Hebrews says, pursue holiness, without which we will not see the Lord.